two different ways we could cut the greens, and both are appropriate for like an Asian style food. Maybe we're cutting some into like a little 1-inch piece chunk. Anybody that's had maybe Mongolian beef or something like that where green onions are a real big part of it, or maybe it's Korean food and beef bulgogi or something like that. You have some maybe larger chunks of green onion there. Maybe in the case of just finishing off a dish, we want some really thinly sliced green onions. So this is where you're guiding, on the knuckles of your guide hand, just really rocking on the tip of your knife. Just taking nice thin slices. And here in this case, you always want to pick through. Your knife maybe hadn't gone through a couple pieces and you have a couple pieces that stuck together. Whenever we're doing knife cuts like we're going to do later on today, I always tell students to pick through them. There's going to be one or two there that don't belong, and it'll be like screaming at you like, look at me. I don't belong here. So pick those out. But so here we have some thinly sliced green onion, and this is where we're starting to get into the white portion. We could probably even go an inch further with this. So maybe finishing off some wontons or a little like miso salmon. That would be an appropriate kind of finish to that, just a little residual heat to cook that. With this white end, we can slice this real thin. We could slice into bigger chunks. The only thing I need to distinguish here is at the end, can cook with it like an onion. So however you choose to cut this, your goal is just to come all the way down and take these little root ends off. And then pretty much the rest of it's useful for whatever use you want. You just want to treat it much more like a regular onion in your preparation. So for a stir fry today, maybe some bigger chunks. So those people that really love it can have at it, and those that hate it can avoid it. Sometimes that's the choice that you make with what you're cutting. But so, really kind of a couple different pieces here, a couple different uses, but you can use the whole thing. And the reason why I stress that is it seems like something I hear again and again, like, well, you can't use that. That's the white part. You can use it. You just might use it in a different way. You might use it at the beginning part of the cooking process. So we'll just add all these to some containers. I really do like both of these for stir fry, but you think about, we have a bunch of vegetables cut into strips. Which one of these is going to be more identifiable in that at the end, like going to have a little bit better look to it? This is an opinion. Who thinks it's going to be the larger pieces? All right. Who thinks it's going to be the smaller pieces? Who has no opinion? Now, really the larger pieces, in my opinion, and it's an opinion thing, and it's because there's going to be a lot of different colors and textures and shapes in there, and the little bit larger piece of green onion will probably show up a little bit better, but that's a preference thing. You guys have carrots peeled, and what we're going to talk about is rondelle and a little bit of a julienne here as well with that. With the carrots already peeled, we could just cut the real tip end off. Again, you cut here, you're wasting a whole lot of carrot, and that adds up. It's like if you're willing to pick up a penny, it'll all add up, and soon you'll have 50 cents or $1. Here, we just want to trim the end off. Maybe there's a little bit of discoloration you want to remove. This would be a part of our waste. For our cuts today, we're going to look to reinforce rondelle a little bit differently than what we did last week. Last week, it was getting you comfortable with your knife, comfortable with holding your hands correctly. Here, I want you guys to focus on just real nice, and you can do a bias cut or straight cut, but really just really nice uniform slices, working with that guide hand of your knife, rocking on the tip of your knife. And then take a couple of them, stack them up and look at them, and you might find, oh, that one I didn't do so good on. Maybe I got to be a little bit better and take my time. But we're trying to make some uniform slices about 1/8 of an inch thick. That's going to be the thickness of one of the cuts we're going to do today is Julienne. That's 1/8 of an inch. So we're looking to take that thickness, about the thickness of the top of your knife is 1/8 of an inch. I want you to practice with the thinner parts. It's even easier. Maybe you guys all have 2 carrots. Go ahead and cut the thick end of your carrots off in about a 2-inch length. We're going to reserve these for your julienne today. The rest of your carrot, I just want you to practice slicing, trying to get it uniform. Part of that, if we were going to slice as a bias cut, again, square up to your cutting board, knife at a 45-degree angle, other hand like a claw. Bias cut means parallel with my body, but now I can look right down my knife, and maybe this is going to be a better way to do it. Just look right down your knife, making sure you're holding your knife straight up and down. It's not point it out or point it in, and just practice on taking nice, uniform slices, the thickness of the top of your knife. That little copper pennies. Once we get that done, we get that somewhat uniform, I think we'll be ready to move on to like the Julienne. So this is, I was backtracking. Take the first 2 inches off of your thick end of your carrot, set those aside, slice up the rest of your carrot, and we'll bring that up here when we're done. So for this cut, again, we're trying to look down the knife, make sure you're cutting straight, holding your hand like a claw, and from this point, we're just trying to take nice 1/8 of an inch thick slices. So looking down your knife with each slice, making sure you're holding your knife straight. That's what I want you guys to focus on with this cut, because at this point, let's say I slip and my knife goes sideways, and this is the slice I end up with. It's a big wedge. Well, this first part, when I go to cut it again, might be that 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. But when I get to this side, that's a 1/4 inch thick. That's going to be a batonette. That's a different cut, and I'll have every range between the two. So if you want to cut a good Julienne, this slicing part is the first and most critical part of it, because if you can't get this dimension pretty uniform, your finished cuts aren't going to be uniform. And really, we've already done 2 out of the 3 cuts we would do with this. We already trimmed it to the length. Now we sliced it up. And I still have some here that are a little bit thin on one side, but we're going to stack them back up. Line them up with the edge of your knife, and we're going to slice one more time, trying to hold them all together. Maybe when I get down to the end here, take them off into just a couple layers of 2. Fluff them up so you can get a good look at them. And you're always going to find like one that doesn't belong. Like you're like, wow, that was a little bit too thin. And so you would set that aside. Maybe some of these little pieces here, you find you could get one more Julienne out of it. So there's going to be some waste associated with this, but all in all, what you're trying to make is a uniform 2 inch in length, something that's about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch by 2 inches, a little wooden matchstick. And for all intents and purposes, these are just a tad on the large side. But the difference between this are, you think about this other piece that I had here. So this is that one that was more like a 1/4 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, Julienne, batonette in terms of the size, very different in their size. This is at least 4 times, or really 4 times larger than what the little Julienne is. And so this is what I want you guys to practice with your other 2 pieces of carrot that you have. If they're longer than 2 inches in length, go ahead and cut them down. You're going to go ahead and trim off the side to give yourself a flat bottom to work with. You're going to go ahead and square up all your sides. And if you hear clunk, 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 or when you're cutting, if you hear it tearing, kind of like something ripping open, your knife's probably dull. Or sometimes knives that are real wedge shaped will rip it a little bit before it cuts it. But so now at this point, what am I going to do? All right, we're going to slice it 1/8 of an inch thick. Again, looking for that thickness of the top of your knife. So just looking down your knife, concentrate on taking little 1/8 inch thick slices. Just like we were evaluating those rondelles that you were doing, stacking them up and looking at them. And that's why we were really doing those first. So when you stack these up, you can identify if I have a wedge, it means I'm not holding my knife straight up and down. Maybe I moved it a little bit. If I have a pretty uniform little stack of pancakes here, whatever you want to call it, whatever it puts in your mind, now I know my cuts are going to be uniform when I take this next step. And that's what I want you to focus on. You're going to bring up your scraps separately from your Julienne, and we're going to walk around. I'm going to help you out with it. But take your time. We have time just to cut these. All right, guys, let's look at the cuts that we have up here. I know we have some people coming in, washing their hands, but I've done a couple other cuts. And the difference between batonette, Julienne, fine Julienne, it's how thick you're slicing it. That's the only difference. But I do want to point out that you look at some of these cuts. We have our Julienne here, which we're trying to get 1/8 of an inch. We have our batonette, which is 1/4 of an inch. Your fine Julienne, which is, again, much smaller, much more like a hair with it. The problem that I saw today, and it's very common, is when you're going to make that slice, if your knife is a little bit off, instead of a nice uniform slice, you're going to make a wedge. And not that I want you guys to get beyond yourself because we have 2 more cuts to go. I'll tell you that those are some of the better knife cuts that I've seen from a Foods 1 class. Usually I get a lot of these, and I get a lot of, they're even bigger than batonette, and you might as well make a crudité, pull out some ranch dressing or something like that, in that you guys are starting to identify that holding your knife correct is important and that you're focusing on taking it smaller. Some guidelines you can use for that, in addition to the thickness of the top of your knife as being about 1/8 of an inch. For most people, 2 knuckles is about 2 inches long. You might have to make it a little bit bigger than that, but that's a guideline that you can use in determining if it's too long or too short. You just don't want it to be a whole finger. Then you're getting too big, and again, too long means you're going to have more of that problem with tapered pointed ends more than anything else. We're going to move on to one of the harder cuts, and I think I'm just going to swap out cutting boards here.